Alright, hey everybody, my name is Riya Jain, and I'll be starting off your MSET training today with this presentation on an introduction to robotics, the first robotics organization, and then MSET. And so this is just a super introductory lecture. We're going to go over these three topics at a pretty high level just to get you familiar with essentially what you're trying to sign up for here. So this is to help you kind of get a better understanding of what robotics is, what this first organization that you're trying to join is, and then specifically what the Saratoga High School MSET Robotics Club is and kind of the expectations that you will have going into the club. And so those are our 4 points that we're going to talk about here. We're going to start off just talking about what is robotics. And so robotics is this interdisciplinary field within engineering. It combines many different aspects of engineering and computer science. So if you think about a standard robot, you have mechanical parts that are moving, so that's mechanical engineering. You have electronic components, so that's electrical engineering. But then you also have like a control hub with software loaded onto it that control the movements of the robot. And so that's both computer engineering and computer science together. And the purpose of a robot is to replicate human actions while increasing the efficiency of work, but then also decreasing the risk factor. So let's take some examples. You might have heard of the Da Vinci surgical robot or a similar type of robot. And really what a surgical robot does is it, as the name suggests, performs surgeries. And so it is able to it's able to do a much more precise job than a human being can, much more consistent, much more accurate. And that really it's not quite efficiency, but it makes the work more likely to succeed in a way. So there's a higher reward out of performing the same task. Um, and then if you think of another type of robot, you might have heard of mining robots. They're working in coal mines and whatnot to extract natural resources. And this kind of work is very dangerous for human beings to be performing just because of the health risks associated with being in a mine and also the risk factor involved with just being in a space that can collapse inwards and really bury people essentially. And so there are definitely a ton of robots that are actually working in these kind of mines now because not only can they work faster because they don't feel fatigue or the kind of dehydration and hunger that human beings do, but they also will not suffer from both short-term and long-term health risks because really as long as you give a robot a new battery every once in a while, it can keep running at the same pace, the same efficiency, essentially forever. And so that's really why robots have become so much more commonplace. A lot of other places you'll see robots would be in self-driving cars. So those are now more commercial robots, but those are able to navigate traffic completely autonomously, which more precise driving, but then also the human risk factor associated with driving is reduced. And then we also have factory robots. So obviously packaging materials and whatnot becomes very mundane work for human beings to do. So for a lot of those applications, we now have robots that are doing that because they can work for longer periods of time with a greater efficiency without feeling the same kind of mundane fatigue. And so looking at the history of robotics, the first mention of an autonomous machine was actually from the Zhou dynasty in China, and so that's 1,000 years before the Common Era. But then when robots became really this idea was with Leonardo da Vinci. So he designed a humanoid robot as a part of his art modeling. You might have seen some of the images. I don't have one put up here, but that was in about 1500 CE. But then the first robots that were truly constructed were these humanoid robots that were exhibited at the World Fair. And so that's the one you can see in the top left-hand corner. And that was from 1939 to 1940. So really not a super long time ago that we first got robots like this, but they really have progressed a lot. And then robots were made commercial in 1956, and as you can imagine, a lot has happened since then. So now let's talk about FIRST as a robotics organization. So the acronym FIRST stands for the inspiration and recognition of science and technology. And what FIRST is it's a larger organization that encompasses many different robotics competitions and divisions that create this whole community of students and mentors and volunteers that work together to provide STEM education to everybody, really. It's about making STEM and engineering education much more accessible but then also giving students the hands-on experience that they might not be able to get in a classroom environment. And so there are three programs within the first organization, and the acronyms for those are FRC, FTC, and FLL. So just briefly going over those, FRC stands for the First Robotics Competition. And so, as I'll get into later, the MSET Club does have an FRC team. What that is it's essentially a larger robot, a much larger team as well, and they compete against each other in competitions during the second semester of the school year. FTC stands for the First Tech Challenge, and that is a team of a maximum of 15 students that create a robot that is 18 inches by 18 inches by 18 inches, and they compete throughout the first and second semester. One thing to know about FRC and FTC is these are both generally high school leagues. FTC might have some middle school teams as well, but now going on to FLL, this might be the one you guys have heard of more. This is primarily elementary school students with some middle school students, and this is called the First Lego League. And so in FLL, students use Lego kits to create their robots that are fully autonomous and run on a tabletop. And so that's another really important differentiating factor between FRC, FTC, and FLL is that FLL, you can buy kits of parts, you make a fully autonomous robot, while with FRC and FTC both, you often have to customize your parts, whether that's just simply making things shorter, cutting things and whatnot, or making a completely custom robot out of sheet aluminum and extrusion parts, and all sorts of other things. And both FRC and FTC do have autonomous portions, but a lot of the robot game is actually human-controlled movement. And so that creates an additional layer of a challenge on top of everything else. One other thing I want to go over here is two of the main guiding principles in the first organization. They're called gracious professionalism and cooperation. And so you might be able to dissect some of the meaning from the actual names of these principles, but gracious professionalism is really just about maintaining a professional demeanor while also being just a gracious and nice person to other people. And so this is mainly applicable in a sort of competition environment where a lot of students have a tendency to view other teams kind of their enemies or their opponents. But that's really not what FIRST is about. FIRST is about creating this inclusive global community, as I mentioned before. And so that ties into cooperation. So cooperation is a combination of the words cooperation and competition. And as you can guess, the competition part is pretty obvious. It's a robotics competition. At the end of the day, there are going to be teams that win awards and win robot games, and teams that aren't able to. But the most important part of this word is really just the cooperation. It's about, even if there's another team that you are up against in a robot match, let's say, that doesn't mean that you should view them as your enemy or as your opponent, because at the end of the day, there's a lot that we can all learn from other teams and from each other. And a lot of just really nice, and also just a lot of really nice, awesome people that you can meet through being part of this first organization. So I really recommend that you keep these in mind, not just at competition, but also in the robotics room and in your daily life. And so the first event was held in 1992, and the first organization at that time was pretty much just what we would consider the FRC competition now. Obviously, it's expanded a lot, as FTC was founded in 2005. And the intention of FTC being founded, just for context, was it was meant to allow for smaller teams with a smaller budget to still get the same robotics experience. And so that's an important factor to note, is that FRC and FTC have students who are in about the same age range. It's primarily high school students. But the real difference is just the size of the team and the size of the robot that they're working on. Now going on to what is MSET. So MSET stands for the Mechanical Science and Engineering Team. And it was founded in 2001 as just FRC Team 649, the MSET Fish. And since then, it's expanded greatly. The MSET Club itself was founded in 2010, and now it encompasses that same FRC team as well as 3 FTC teams. So if you look on the right, we have some team pictures. There's a picture of one of our FTC robots from a couple years ago, and then a picture of the FRC flag. And so MSET has become a pretty well-respected robotics club in Northern California, but then also a pretty big part of Saratoga High School in general. And so just quickly going over the MSET leadership structure so you get familiar with some of these names. We have different categories of leadership. So we start off with our senior mentors. These are the adults that you will turn to if you ever need technical guidance or even non-technical guidance for your team, for yourself, for just understanding what robotics is in general. So here we have Mr. France, Mr. Lichtenberg, who you can call Mr. L, Mr. Nguyen, and Mr. Garg. Our lead mentors are Mrs. Garg for the FRC program and then Mr. Jain for the FTC program. And so these will be the parents that are managing a lot of the logistics for both of these programs. If you ever need logistical help, the people you turn to are right here. And then going down to student leadership, we have the club president, so that's me, Riya Jain. The outreach lead that manages all the outreach we do in our community with different schools, etc. And that's Kasha Minocha. And then our business and marketing lead, who manages finances, who manages marketing the club, sort of that whole face of the club idea, and that's Arnab Pola. And so if you ever need to contact us, I'm actually part of the FTC program, and then Kasha and Arnab are both in FRC, and so that's where you can usually find us. Okay, and our last section is about the expectations for members of the MSET Robotics Club. So this is not a complete list. Obviously, there are some things that I'm not going to highlight here, but these are just the general ideas. So first off, there is an attendance requirement. Attendance will be taken at all of your team's robotics meetings. And it's not going to be a crazy requirement. MSET's not meant to consume your entire life. But it's really just to judge if you are willing to put in the commitment and contribute to your team the way that they need you to contribute. Because if you're not able to do that, then there are many other students who would really love to be on your team and be able to get the same experiences that you are. So really keep that in mind throughout the entire season, that your attendance is super duper crucial in deciding whether you'll be invited back for another year in MSET. Obviously, there's just a genuine interest in learning, and you don't have to be genuinely interested in mechanical engineering or in computer science. There are a lot of different things that you can do within your robotics team in MSET, and I'll get to those in a different presentation. But you really just need to have an interest in being part of the robotics club and being part of FIRST. Then there's appropriate behavior. So this one shouldn't be too difficult to follow. Really just be respectful of other students, especially of your senior mentors. Be a contributor to your team. Don't bring anyone down. Work together with people, etc., etc. I'm sure you guys have heard all this before. Just keep it in mind, especially when it comes to those late nights. You've been in the room for a long time and everyone's kind of on edge, but really just keep in mind that the people in the robotics room are there to support you. They're not there to try to prevent you from achieving the success that you want to. And so you should treat them with respect. And then obviously gracious professionalism. I talked about this on the first slide, so I'm not going to reiterate the definition, but that's really crucial to being an effective member of a FIRST robotics team. And so that pretty much wraps up this introductory presentation. If you go to the website where you found this training material, you'll see that there's a really short assignment to complete just to check that you watched the video, you understood the general concepts that are being taught. But then we have a couple more videos left in just this basic required information section. So go ahead and check those out as well. This is a little bit more of a basic informational presentation, but we'll be getting more into what the different subsystems on our robotics team are, and then also just how to work in a team. And then once you've completed this section, you can go on to explore some of the technical things that might be of more interest to you, whether that's hardware engineering, CAD design, software, or business management.